Hey everyone, welcome to the podcast today. I'm Brian with Antonio. Did you shave today? No.
I trimmed it.
Are we done with the beard jokes?
We can
No
keep
more
doing
beard.
them. It's just a little shorter now.
Oh, is that what it is?
You
You
know.
look more distinguished.
Yeah, it's better now. Look so homeless.
Hey, today guys, we've got a great podcast for you. We're here with Roy Grace. Roy's with the Pope and Young Club. He's an official scorer with them. And we're just gonna have a little conversation about animals and heads. And Roy's he's a great guy to talk to. I've enjoyed him over the years, getting to know him a little bit. And first of all, Roy, thank you for coming. We appreciate you being here.
You're welcome.
Okay.
We got to hear about the mountain lion story though. It's pretty neat.
Yeah, that's a good one to start off with. So we were deer hunting, my wife and I. We both bow hunt. That's all we do. And we were up here in the White Mountains, and she was in a deer stand in a ground blind that I had put up for her, and little pockets of water where deer were coming in. So she sat there, and on the second morning, it was about 9 a.m, and she set her chair up so she had to turn her head to the left for a long time. And she set her next to her, getting tired, and she brought it forward and looked, and 12 yards away is a tall mountain lion looking at her.
Wow.
And so she was hunting by herself. So she was, and you know Annie, so
Yeah.
she was a little panicked, a little scared, and said she shot her compound like a recurve at the first arrow. Doesn't know where the arrow went. But the cat didn't know what she was, in my opinion, because it kind of just jumped back a couple yards and stopped and looked at her. She ranged it 19 yards. She got another second arrow on and then drilled it. And then, yeah.
Wow.
And so then I get this, Zolio text because there's no cell service up there. I just hit a lion, get over here. And I'm thinking to myself, well, she didn't say I just smoked a lion. So am I going to be tracking a wounded lion? And when I got her settled down and I got there and she was shaking, Brian, she could barely stand.
Oh, I can imagine.
And so, they're not like elk or deer, so they don't leave tracks. So where was the last place you saw it? And I always taught her, follow your arrow, see where it hits, and then last place to see the animal. So she tells me, and I go there. And we find blood, and then it only went about 130 yards, but it went into one of those locust thickets.
Mm.
So I'm, of course, tore up.
So was a little hinky walking through there looking.
It was because about 20 yards in, she's like, I think I heard a growl. I'm like, you didn't hear a growl. But once we got it, she was really happy. And I told her, you've been doing this a long time, just like me. How rare
That's unheard of. Yeah, that's unheard of.
And then, talking with some of the BIA guys, I mean, she's going to be the only woman to ever kill one in Arizona without the use of dogs with a bow and arrow.
Wow.
And so, I try not to tell her those things because
Don't let the head get too big.
Yeah, exactly. She already lets me know, how many times have you gone out with a husband and not got one? She's already let me know that. So, yeah, it was a great. And at that point, she was like, I don't care if I get a deer. I really don't care. This is incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of hard to top that.
Yeah. And to shoot a tom, of course, I thought, that's probably a female. No, of course, it's a tom.
Of course.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, of course.
and a good one too, right?
Yeah. I don't think it's going to make Pope Beyond. It's going to most definitely make the state. But
Nice.
so, kind of a younger tom. I don't think he was very old. Game warden that checked him in. You thought maybe a couple of years, but he was probably 100, and based on the meat and everything, they figured about 130 pounds.
Wow.
So yeah, but she was ecstatic.
I bet.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's a cool story.
Yeah, very, very nice.
That's cool.
Very nice.
So, Roy, kind of give us a kind of a background of you, where you came from, how you got into Pope and Young. I know you've been hunting for your whole life,
Yeah.
so if you can give us kind of a rundown of where you come from.
Well, originally, I was from the People's Republic of California.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was terrible. But my dad was a bow hunter, built bows as a side hobby, etc. So I was just brought up with a bow at 5, 6 years old. That's just what you did. And so I was always into bow hunting, and then I became pretty involved in our state organization. and then became a measurer for their state book. And then that kind of manifested it into Pope and Young. I became a measure for Pope and Young a while ago.
Yeah.
And once I became a measurer and understood the scoring system and the history of Pope and Young, I just got more involved. So I had been a measure for a while, and then I was put on the records committee for Pope and Young as the youngest member ever to be on the committee. I was a younger person. And the records committee is basically, they're the committee that look at any questionable entries, or, hey, is this within fair chase, or is this abandoned search? So they'll look at all the circumstances and any new rules that come about, or request for new rules or new animals. Like we just added bison from Montana from the Fort Peck Indian Reservation. They investigate all that to ensure that everything's on the level. And so, excuse me, I was on that committee, and I've been on that committee 18 years now.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah. And so just the maturation process of that, I became the records chairman. And so now I'm the records chairman. I have been for going on 6 years, which is the board of directors for Pope and Young. Board of directors, there's 13 of us, I believe. And so as the records chairman, you also sit on the board. And the records chairman, I'm in charge of that committee, of course, and also all the measures in the North America. So Mexico, Canada, United States, they fall under me, and anything records related. So I help teach the courses with Boone and Crockett and Pope and Young for new measures. And then anything that comes up regarding entries, and I always, we can laugh about this, but whitetail people are crazy. I'm here to tell you, I've answered more emails and phone calls from attorneys on why their clients whitetail only measure this, because it's a big business for eastern whitetail.
Yeah.
And so that opened my eyes.
Well, and I think the numbers too. You
Oh, yeah.
understand?
It's the number one hunted
Yeah.
big game animal in North America still. And so I got really involved in Pope and Young then. My professional side, I started out as a game warden. I was in law enforcement. And then when I couldn't get time off to go bow hunt during season, I went to another agency, a very large agency, about 5,000 sworn. And so I worked there, and it was nice because I could work overtime and bank it as comp time. And so I was able to go bow hunt. And I did 30 years until I maxed out. And then my wife was a school teacher. And we met in Blythe, which is, is right on the Arizona border. So I was hunting Arizona forever, since the early 80s.
Okay.
Because we lived right, it was closer to Arizona than to go anywhere else in California. So we were always in Arizona. My wife is from Wyoming. So that was a very big change for her to go to the desert. As I worked my way up in rank and I retired, I had to wait. I retired in April 2018, and I had to wait 2 months for her to retire. And her last day of teaching was the 13th of June, and we were here in Pine Top on the 14th of June.
How did you find Pine Top?
Well, that's a great story. So if you recall, I think it was 2015, we had the Pope and Young convention in Phoenix. And so a long time born and raised person I know from Arizona was there. And I told him at the time, the plan was to retire in Wyoming, right? I mean, that's where she's from. It's God's country. It's beautiful. It's cold in the winter, but it's a beautiful country. And so that was the plan. But I wanted to live in Arizona for 6 months and a day so I could get the lifetime license and being a lifetime draw as a non-resident, living somewhere else. So I tell this person, and Tom Wagner, who does the Heroes, I go, yeah, look around Flagstaff. He's like, oh, don't go there. Don't go there. It's college town. It's busy. Because you need to go to look at that show area. And Brian, of all the years I hunted Kaibab everywhere else, I had never hunted out this way. I never had to, right? So that Memorial Day, right after the convention, we take a ride up here and we spend the weekend. And of course, I was in love. I wanted to stay here forever. And so we're going back. She loved it. The realtor asked what our hobbies were. I was looking for a place to live for at least like 6 months, 7 months. And he drew us a map and goes, go check this area out. So we drive out there and we pull around the corner and there's 300 head of elk. Where now my house is in this field. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And we're driving home. She goes, this is where I want to be. And I'm like, where? Well, we were tonight. I'm like, well, there's no house there. She goes, no, you don't understand. We're not going to Wyoming anymore.
Oh,
I have to pull the car over and go, are you sure? And so we ended up calling the White Mountains our home. And I got to tell you, doing my line of work in Southern California for 30 years, I really kind of lost faith in humanity, if that makes sense,
sure.
in that area. I really enjoy the people up here. I've gotten very involved in the community. And I mean, people wave at the police up here with all their fingers. It's amazing how it is up here. And people respect. I mean, we just lost our 2 firefighters and the amount of support. I never saw that.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it?
It is amazing. And, you know, the Ken Isons and the people that I've met in this town and community and have done things has been great. And that's really allowed me to do a lot of stuff with Pope and Young. And then, you know, the taxidermists that are up here, of course, you know, and everyone, they loved it because I'm retired. So when they call me,
You're right there.
when do you need me? And so I measure probably about 30 Boone and Crockett heads a year, which is a lot.
Wow.
Well,
I actually probably do more Boone and Crockett heads than Pope and Young.
Is
Simply
that because of the reservation and things
Yeah.
like that?
most of our elk that I'm measuring, a lot of them are from public land, but a lot of them are from the tribe, from the White Mountain Apache. A lot of bears, do a lot of bears and a lot of elk, and a few mule deer, some antelope. I did do the number 2 Boone and Crockett muskox from a gentleman that lives here in the White Mountains in Sholo.
Really?
I measured a muskox here in Sholo, and it ended up being number 2 in Boone and Crockett.
wow.
And you know, you don't get very many muskox in Arizona.
No, it's pretty.
Oh,
That's
So I got really involved. I am gonna, as you know, I'm gonna step down in March and give someone else a chance. The records chairman position in Pope and Young is the busiest on the board. I mean, there's not a day that goes by I'm not working on something with records. We have approximately 130,000 records in Pope and Young.
130,000.
130,000.
Wow. That's crazy.
And, you know, putting that data together when I was on the committee with you, I mean, Arizona has a strong represent. At one time, there were 4 or 5 world records in Pope and Young there from Arizona.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of people don't realize that, you know, antelope and elk and mule. I mean, we got some incredible.
We don't like to advertise that too much.
Yeah, you're right. But it's interesting on a measure side, seeing the genetics and the food. And we have dry climates here, not even in the mountains, but the genetics and the food that they eat produces some pretty incredible animals.
Yeah. We're pretty blessed in this state to have the diversity of wildlife that we have and the quality of wildlife that we have.
Yeah, very much so. And, you know, I was very surprised coming from that line of work, beginning of my career. You know, we all talk bad about every state's game and fish. Oh, they don't do this. I was very pleasantly surprised. I think you were too when we were on that focus group of just how they valued our opinion.
Yeah.
And listened. And that's pretty rare because that wasn't from the state I came from. That was not the.
You know, it was eye-opening for me. And I think that in the past, I said it in the previous podcast that I think that there were some anti-bow hunting people that were into game of fish, and they have now transitioned out. Some new blood's coming in, and they're so much more open to bow hunters now. And there's so much they're wanting to see. They're, you know, like the OTC tags. They're wanting to see those remain, and that's so huge. We're one of the few states that have that.
Exactly.
And without that, the retainment, I think would be so much further down with bow hunters without having that OTC. So I think they're open to that now. And I mean, don't get me wrong, game and fish has their flaws. No,
Absolutely.
you'll still scratch your head.
Yep.
But I think they're trying to make the right direction twice.
Yeah, I was just very pleased with how they valued our opinion because, that group was made up of a lot of personnel from them as well, paid staff.
Yeah.
But the 5 of us that weren't, they really listened. Like the research I had to do on the different states, Dr. Harding took that. She was very grateful for it. That's just, you don't see that a lot of states.
Yeah, I think maybe it's the future of game and fish. Maybe that's what they're doing. I think that's kind of like the first time they've ever done that. I think.
Yeah.
I think that was unheard of. I think.
Right.
And I think now, hopefully, with that focus group and what it's accomplished, maybe they'll open that up more.
I think it will. I think it will. Like I told you earlier, I mean, I've already had other inquiries for other groups and stuff and committees, and it's opened the door for us. I thought it was very smart of them to put not just a representative from Pope and Young, but Brian Reisman from the state organization, shop owners, and including Eddie Corona, if you remember, from the CHAMP program.
Yeah.
So you had all different viewpoints and data. I just thought that was very well put together.
Yeah. So when you're talking about, when you're talking about the antelope and the bear, is elk predominantly up here what you're scoring the most of, you think?
Yeah, here in the White Mountains, yeah, most definitely. A lot of elk, and then probably followed by black bears. Black bears.
Yeah, I see that.
Mark Terrell, the game warden, a friend of mine up here, just told me, he asked me, want to go on a release tonight? I couldn't. I had something else going on. But there are over 130 black bears trapped in Pinetop Lakeside alone this summer.
Yeah, this summer being the drought that we're in,
yeah,
they're having a big bear problem.
I didn't even know we had that many.
It's crazy.
But yeah, a lot of bears. A lot of them are probably coming off the res too,
Yeah.
water and food.
Yeah.
It
seems like that Pinetop Country Club area, all that in there, those community up by Los Burros, they're really getting hammered.
Yeah, a lot of bears. They've been so busy. He said he hasn't even been able to get out much for the hunt, the archery elk hunt that was going on because they're busy mitigating bear calls.
Yeah.
And dealing with those. I mean, it's a good problem to have. It's nice to have that many bears in our region.
Absolutely.
But yeah, that's probably the second most is bears. Yeah. And then cows coos, we call them coos now in Arizona, but the whitetail, that's probably the third most. I do quite a few of those as well.
So the history of the Pope and Young, obviously Boone and Crockett's the oldest one, back in the 1880s, I believe.
Yep.
Pope and Young came around in the early 60s, is that correct?
Yeah, in 1961, by our founder was Glenn St. Charles. And really what's unique about this, when you think about this story in today's world, he got permission from Boone and Crockett to use the scoring system with the idea to convince game and fish agencies throughout the nation that the bow and arrow was a viable weapon to manage the resource. There was never bow only seasons ever. And so the way to do that was through the scoring system. And what he wanted to show them was not only can we just shoot something, but we can target mature animals, older class animals for you, whatever you need. And that record system allowed that. And once he started getting the data records and started producing raw scientific data, because a lot of people don't realize for Boone and Crockett and Pope and Young now, those are all data points that are scientific driven. Because at one time, Boone and Crockett truly believed, before Theodore Roosevelt really took Boone and Crockett to a different level in conservation, that our North American animals were going to be extinct.
Yeah.
And that's why they started that. They wanted the way to be able to show that antler system of what it did over skulls. And so when we started handing over that data in the 60s to these agencies requesting an archery only season, and there was enough people interested in doing it, well, then this state would get an archery only season. And now I don't know of a state, that does not have an archery season. And that all began with Glenn St. Charles and Pope and Young Club in 1961.
I didn't realize how much of a conservation company that Pope and Young was. You always think about the records keeping and things like that, the trophy heads and stuff, but to know how much conservation that it does and how much, we bow hunters owe to Pope and Young. You get back to the history of it, it's kind of amazing.
Yeah, and it's probably, we try to do more of it now. More people are becoming aware of it because I believe as a board member, I voiced this. I don't think we sold that well enough. Everybody, well, Pope and Young is just about a trophy animal.
Yeah.
It took years, Brian, for people to, I would tell them, you don't have to kill a you don't have to kill an animal to be a Pope and Young member. I don't. No, records is just a subsection of what we do, and conservation is a big part of it. One of our number one goals is to preserve our way of life. What we like to do is bow hunting, and we do a lot of conservation efforts. Again, now that I'm up here and I'm retired, we kind of done a different route, a two-pronged approach to conservation, not just throwing money at something that's a good cause, but we're putting boots on the ground for Pope and Young members on certain projects. I personally and some other measures from around here have done some right here in the White Mountains. We've rebuilt a couple guzzlers with Arizona Elk Society and Game and Fish on behalf of Pope and Young that needed rebuilt. I was telling you, we got to trap some turkeys and
Yeah.
band them, which is, yeah, it's not a North American big game animal for records keeping, but it's conservation on turkeys and data of how far they travel, mortality rate, et cetera. And Pope and Young went right in with that with boots on the ground to help them with there. We've done some bear studies up in Oregon, back east. We've done some ram studies, boots on the ground. So we're starting to do it, we call a two-prong approach conservation, not just supporting money and a legislative side, kind of like what you and I did with Game and Fish here to give them the legislative side of bow and arrows versus other weapon systems, but also boots on the ground. And I believe I've sold more memberships for people that have killed a big animal and they want to be a member. When they go, what's my $45 a year due? Well, you get this magazine, and I show them the magazine, but here's some conservation projects. When they hear, oh, you mean you guys actually went out and did these?
Yeah.
Yeah. They're good to throw money at that. And I was the same way. I would give money to that. I just didn't want what we call the Amway approach of conservation, just throw money somewhere and hope they do. We got away from that. We still do some that are very important, like the mule deer migration study in the University of Wyoming. We have funded that before. We're funding feeding in Utah. I remember a few years ago when all the mule deer were dying in Utah.
Yeah.
We funded a lot of that for feeding programs to help save those deer. So we do that, but the board now and our conservation chair, who's a former game warden, it's really nice because we really vet those projects to ensure it's something that benefits wildlife and bow hunting.
That's good.
So,
That's good.
yeah.
That's awesome.
So do you ever get, there's always that argument out there that, hey, Pope and Young and Boone and Crockett, it's ruining hunting because it's all about score. It's making hunting all about score.
Right.
What's your argument with that?
I hear that. I try to explain the data point system to them, and they go, well, really? I mean, that's a great propaganda sales pitch. Well, since I've been records chairman, I've had 11 states ask for our data for scientific purposes, for tag allotments. They realize that that's only a small percentage of what was taken out of, let's say, I'll use Arizona. Hey, we want to look at kaibab in the strip of what's come in, because you know as well as I do, Ryan, that you get that card survey. What did you kill? How many points did you have? Well, a 4x4 could be this big, or it can be this big.
Absolutely.
And so for game and fish personnel and Mr. Hefflinger, who works here, I mean, he's a deer guy guru, to get a better idea of what kind of trophies are taken out, because we don't have mandatory check-in here, right? Not in person. So they use our data system to go, okay, from these last 3 years, there's been X amount of deer taken from kaibab in the strip, and they scored this. So these are probably an age class group of this. So there's a lot of data that they get. Utah gets it every year. Every year they want our data. And then they make decisions now off of some of that. Because like I said, if they're killing nothing but, 2.5-year-old 4 points versus 180-inch class, it's probably at least 5 years old, that gives them a better view and a snapshot of what's going on in that
Yeah,
unit of take.
Absolutely.
So I sell that. The other part is, you know, I put mine in for a different reason. There's two scores. Here's what I tell people that really are, I don't know if I want to do this. There's two scores of match. The minimum entry score and the world record. Everything else in between is fodder. If you look at it that way, yeah, 185-inch mule deer, that's a giant, that's a big mule deer. That's a great mule deer. Not the world records, not the entry. Those are the two most important numbers. Everything else helps support the club and our mission. It also gives those data points that are needed for the game and fish. More importantly, and what I view it as, when you and I and he's gone in 100 years, and hopefully they're still bow hunting something, there's a record that you and I bow hunted. There's documented record that we on this date killed this animal.
Mm.
And it's in every major library in the nation. It's a documented book. And
A history book.
it's a history book. And I would love my great grandchildren to be able to go, oh, look, there's great grandpa, you know, on this date, he was hunting in Arizona. And so for me, I just like to know that my thumbprint was here on earth on that day and I was bow hunting.
Nice.
And I did it under the rules of fair chase.
Yeah.
And to me, that's important. And so usually when I tell people that, they don't think of that and go, wow, it's not about, I'll be honest with you, Brian. I tell people, how many times have you looked at a Boone and Crockett or a Pope Young book? Oh, a lot. I've looked at them. Can you tell me who the name of the hunter on the number 3 whitetail? No, because it's not about a name. People don't look at I don't look at that and see who killed it.
Yeah.
I look at it and go, oh, look at the main beams on this, you know, the data. And I kid because I looked at this one long and I'm like, man, that is a big elk. And I'm looking at it, man, it was from Montana. Lo and behold, Chuck Adams killed it. I just happened to look, it was Chuck Adams, most famous bow hunter in the world. And that just tells you a lot of people, there are those right now, especially with social media. I agree. It's all about a number.
And that's the key is the social media.
Yeah.
That's my argument. I don't think it's so much, I think the score-based things is social media driven.
Absolutely.
I think that's where, you know, we talked about that earlier today about what people in their mind think that they're going to come out and kill, all based off of social media posts.
Right. I to this day, I think, you know, watching my son at 12 years old arrow his first deer, and it was dope. I think, and he'll agree, it was probably the biggest trophy of his life.
Mm-hmm.
And score is just a number.
Yeah.
It's just a number. Where we've gotten away as a society, a hunting society, and it's social media driven as everyone wants likes, everybody wants to be liked.
Yeah.
You know, this 125-inch whitetail is told that it's 150. You're looking at it going, there's no way.
Yeah.
And, you know, unfortunately, that driven with some, not all, some guides and some outfits, they like those big numbers, right? And so ultimately, I'm the bearer of bad news when it comes to me. But I tell them all, even if it doesn't make the minimum, were you happy when you shot this? Yeah. This is a great trophy. And anybody that, in my opinion, that takes the time to practice, learn the skill of a bow and arrow, and takes an animal, I don't care if it's a doe, female, I don't care what it is. It's hard to do. It's a lot harder than most people think.
Yeah, and if people come in the shop, they'll show you the picture. Like, I killed this buck, and almost like they're ashamed to want to show you this picture of this small buck. And like, did you kill with a bow? They're like, yeah, tell me the story behind it. I mean, it's that you kill with a bow. You don't realize how hard that is.
Exactly.
Very few people have killed deer with a bow and arrow, and I think that's again, we're social media. Well,
Mhm.
it doesn't score 120 inches of whitetail. You know, who cares?
Right.
As long as
Yeah,
you're happy with
exactly.
it, that's what it's all about.
I wish I could have Fred Eichler sit next to me on every person
Yeah.
that, because there's a guy that has the grand slam with a recurve,
Yeah, and scores never.
and he's shot some tremendous trophies, but it's not a big thing to him. When he gets one, it's like, yeah, I'd like to enter just to, you know, support the club and get the data points. But that guy, I mean, you'll have to hold his arrows if a small doe comes by, he's on it. And I love that.
I hunted with Fred in Colorado on antelope hunt one time, and there was an antelope buck out there. He's like, let's go kill that thing. Like, I don't think I want to kill it. He's like, he got half.
Yeah.
He's like, what do you mean I want to kill it? I'm like, I've got bigger. He's like, we're killing that antelope. Okay. I mean, it's just the way Fred is.
I just love his enthusiasm. And he's got it.
Yeah.
He knows when a big animal goes, wow, there's a chance I can take a big animal, and he'll hunt it, and he'll most likely get it. But he's never ashamed of anything he's taken, and he uses everything he kills.
Well, and his enthusiasm is crazy. I mean, it doesn't matter what size it is. He hit a shot of 14 inch bull, and actually it's only a 310, but you would think it's the giant
Exactly.
record. He's just, his enthusiasm, and he's so fun to hunt with. But I learned a big fact with us with, like, you just don't pass up opportunity.
Right. And I like that. And that's what I try to tell people when they're coming in and they're not sure if they want to enter something, or, I go, even if it's doesn't make our minimum, I'm going to give you what it does score. You're going to have this, man, be a member. And a lot of them I'll sign up as just a member. You're going to get this great magazine. The magazine's worth $45. You get them 4 times a year, 5 times a year on the extra one is worth it. But just the discounts you get and the things you can get as being a member. And the main thing for me, Brian, is I researched a lot of organizations when I was younger. You got elk foundations and mule deer. There's so many. And I always wanted to look at financial sheets of where the money's going. And, Boone Crockett and Pope and Young, we're a nonprofit, a true nonprofit. We don't make money. We have certain employees that do certain things that we have to pay. But other than that, our money goes to what we're fighting for, to maintain archery only seasons.
Yeah. That's on the TV shows and,
No,
and buying ranches to hunt.
no, I wish we had the money to do some stuff to get our word out, but we don't.
Yeah.
We're, I refer to us often, and I sit on Boone and Crockett Records Committee as well. Great organization. I mean, they're the father of all this conservation stuff. But I just tell them, because they have some pretty good financial support there. I'll just say that throughout the country and the world. We're the blue collar bow hunter. Pope and Young are blue collar bow hunters. And I tell people, I don't know, Brian Yorksmith,
Oh, yeah.
Yorksmith's up here. I tell them the story, and Chris, his son, you could go to a Pope and Young convention and sit down next to Chuck Adams, and you're not going to hear Chuck Adams' hunt stories. It's not the way he is. Most people don't believe that. He wants to hear about your hunt. He wants, hey, tell me about your hunt. What did you do? And the first time I met him, I had these illusions like, okay, they're very standing out. It's Chuck Adams, right? Nothing like what I expected. And now we're good friends. And he's just a helper. He loves talking with kids. And you meet a lot of those, the Tom Hoffmans. These are guys that have super slams. I have one of them on my committee, Frank Noska from Alaska. He's working on his 3rd super slam with a bow and arrow.
Wow.
And he's got the most humbled people because they're all like us. They're blue collar bow hunters. And, I always tell people if I can get them as a member, especially like Brian and his son went to the Phoenix convention we just had last April here in Phoenix. They loved it. I mean, you're meeting people and seeing people that, oh, there's Randy Ulmer. There's guys, but in your line of business, you've got to meet some of these people and you go, wow, this person's actually pretty away person. And they all love bow hunting and they can come and talk. And I explain it as Pope and Young as this, Brian. If you could have a hunting camp with a campfire, that's the Pope and Young convention. It's like going to a hunting camp because they're all telling, hey, where are you going in February? Okay, I might be able to help you on that. And that's what it is at these conventions. And it's really eye-opening and refreshing for people. Once people go to their first convention, they usually they don't miss another one because you're going to seminars that are free, just all these different things that are going on there. Plus we had 186 trophies on display. So we take the top 5 animals from the 2-year recording period for each convention. We had 186, their largest display ever. 10 world records, new world records.
Wow.
So when you see that, and I go, that's our conservation at work. That's our game and fish that sometimes we just don't, we scratch our head going, why are you doing this? But we are now having more world records every convention than we've ever had. Some of that is some of the rules we changed in Pope and Young that I changed, that velvet animals are treated the exact same as hardhorn. That was a big positive. I mean, our membership wanted that. We got it. But now we're seeing these. Well, we never used to see those trophies at a convention. Now you're seeing them. You're seeing 180-inch Eastern whitetail from Kentucky in full velvet. And we've never seen that before.
Wow.
And so those are just, it's a great organization. But they're very blue collar. You're not going to have people that look down at you or anything like that. It's a pretty easy going organization.
Well, that's just the bow hunting community in general. I
Yep,
think.
exactly.
Yeah. Tony, you got anything you want to ask him?
Yeah, I didn't know about the velvet. So you guys treat velvet the same as hardhorn now as far as score? You don't subtract the 10%?
No. So the state of Arizona record book, BI Bull Hunting in Arizona record book, they used to do that. They have now changed that as well. They have a separate velvet category so they don't take a percentage. But Pope and Young in 1985, when we started accepting mule deer only, we tried it out with mule deer only because the West, we kept telling the board, hey, us in the West, when we hunt them, they're in velvet. Nevada is always in velvet. And so we're getting penalized. Well, they allowed mule deer only. And so they're measured the exact same. There's no difference. There's no deduction. They were put in a separate category, but they were never eligible for world record status or first, second, or third place during the convention 2 years. They would get an honorable mention only. Well, then years later, they just finally opened it up to any antlered animal that has velvet has a category, but they were never eligible for awards, which I always had a little problem with that because it was $35 entry then, but you're taking the same amount for a hardhorn. Why are we treating them different? Their fear was, and I understand it, is, hey, how can you have two world record mule deer? I go, easy. One's in velvet and one's hard rag. People know the difference. And once I was able to let the board know and see that, and that is one area social media did help in. They know, hey man, this is a velvet one. This is a hard rack one. Once we were able to do that, we gained members that quit the club because of our velvet rule. A bunch of them from Utah that rejoined the moment I changed that.
So is it a separate class now?
Yeah, they just so it'd be exactly. There's 4 categories in, let's say, mule deer: non-typical and typical hard rack, non-typical and typical velvet.
Gotcha.
And then both compete for their own respective world record status, etc. And the reason why the driving force to do that was a buck from Utah, Kane County, Pausagon, 218-inch net typical buck that was killed 12 years ago. And when he entered it, the hunter didn't know. He thought, goes to a convention, no award. You get like a certificate. And just so you know, 218-inch net taken by a hunter would be the largest in 50 years in Boone and Crockett.
Wow.
So that's just an anomaly buck, right?
And you get a participation award.
Yes. And it really turned Bodie off. I mean, and rightfully so. Because at the time, we didn't do a really good job explaining why. They just said, that's the way it is. If you don't like it, tough. Well, imagine how that went over. So a bunch of people from Utah quit Pope and Young over that. When we changed the rule where they would be treated exactly the same, we got a bunch of members back from Utah. And I got so many, a lot of times I get bad emails like, oh, why do you guys do this? I got so many great emails from what our committee did and the board from changing the development rule. And as a Western guy, you get it. But I had a lot of whitetail guys. Kentucky, they hunt a lot of whitetails in velvet.
Yeah.
Wyoming does. The Dakotas. So there was a lot of people that were happy because they didn't want to strip the velvet and alter their trophy.
Just to get the book.
Exactly. Exactly. So that was a great thing I think we did.
Let's talk a little bit about the fair chase
Okay.
and what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. I know at one time, I think the let off on compound boats was limited to, so where are we at now with equipment stuff?
So the main difference between Boone and Crockett's fair chase and ours, the first several are the exact same. You know, you can't hunt an animal, kill an animal, or enter it in the book if it's caught in a fence or it's locked up. You know, it's not a fair chase. There are some equipment differences though. So for Pope and Young, and this is the hardest thing I struggle with talking with young folks that don't know, is it has to be a bow and arrow.
Not a crossbow, not
Crossbow is not a bow and arrow. It's got to be a hand drawn and handheld the way bow that casts an arrow. And so that caused us a lot of problems, as you can imagine, because when crossbows really became popular a few years back, I mean, I had this 15-year-old girl that shot this whitetail. It was big. And she was so excited. Right. And I'm going over the fair chase. Oh, what kind of bow? And when you look at the maker, you're like, they don't make a bow. I'm like, oh, this is not going to be good.
Yeah.
But there's a silver lining to this for fair chase. So a new organization got permission from Boone and Crockett and Pope and Young. It's called Bolton Quorum. It is a record book, just like us, just like Boone and Crockett, and they only take crossbow kills.
Oh, really?
It's relatively new, about the last year and a half, 2 years. And this girl, luckily, I mean, she was like, you could just see it in her face. I felt bad. Her dad's there. And I go, but there's a new organization. This is what they do. They use us, our scorers, and Boone and Crockett scorers. Would you like to? And then she's happy to get. Because of that, and I had an avenue for her, they signed up for Pope and Young.
Nice.
Because of that. And she wants to graduate, if you will, to a harder weapon system, a bow and arrow. And so that's the biggest difference. Boone and Crockett, and I laugh, I tease them all the time. My buddies over there, my compadres, you can hit a big elk with a car and it dies and get a salvage tag, and you can put it in Boone and Crockett if it makes it. That's that, and it goes as a pickup,
Yeah.
but you can find one dead, and if it's all legal, you can enter it if it makes there. Pope and Young, it has to be an archery killed animal within the rules of fair chase. And then some of the equipment, I mean, we used to not allow any electronics on the arrow or the bow at all. It was a hard line drawn. It was easy for us as measurers because we didn't have to go through a list of items of what's allowed. It was just clear cut. The membership then, several years back, maybe 10 years ago, allowed, okay, we'll allow Luminox on the arrow only. And the only other electronic that's allowed on the bow is, remember when the craze where your stabilizer goes, they'd have the camera that you could.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, technically that was an electronic testable, so we could allow it. So we allowed those as long as it didn't emit a light forward and all that. So those are still, to date, the only two electronics allowed on the bow.
What about sight lights?
Yes, that's a great point. Sight lights we just changed. I mean, that's probably been within the last 6 months. And that barely passed because there was a lot of people that felt, you know, why, if you need it. But then there's a lot of whitetail guys hunting in ground blinds
Exactly.
that, let's just say, we're getting our age and couldn't, the pins would blur in a darkened environment. And so we looked at all that. The committee looked at all that. The committee gave a recommendation to, and it was pretty split, to the board to send it to the voting membership. And it narrowly passed, but we now do allow those, but they can only be a sight light. So as you know, there's Wazoo stuff on sites coming out right now that they have GPS trackers now and in Knox.
Yeah, the breadcrumb.
And those were not allowed for obvious reasons. So the big one that I deal with a lot, that I actually got a call from a commissioner here in Arizona, if we allowed it, if Boone and Crockett allowed it as well, is range finding sites. And they are not allowed for Pope and Young or Boone and Crockett. And I just saw the writing on the wall. I think that's going to
It's
be
coming.
going away.
It's coming.
And I'm not, I like technology for what it has, but it can, as you know, it can be a detriment too. I want a balance. And
Yes.
like I tell people, bow hunting's hard and it should be hard.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be easy. So I see that going away here in Arizona, which will probably change BIA's stance because right now they allow them. So they're probably going to have to deal with that. But I could just tell by the wording and what he was saying, that's probably the next step.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing. Yeah, it's
You know.
going to be the next one on the list. What about let off?
Let off, now you can go to 99% let off.
But before it was like 80% or
It
something.
used to be 50%
Yeah.
years ago, and then went 65, and then they were like, the technology was moving so fast, we were playing continual catch up of let off.
Mhm.
And then, there was always this myth that, hey, they're going to walk around the woods at full draw off. You're talking to an age group that are parents, Brian. I mean, quite honestly, and it's shot recurves, and so they're afraid. They were of the unknown. They just didn't know. And so once there was a little bit more education on, you used to be a tournament guy too. And hey, if you can shoot a 99% let off bow pretty accurately, more power to you, because I think it would be incredibly.
It's detrimental.
Yeah. I still love bows that I can get the least amount of let off because I just get a crisper release. So now it's to 99%. And there is no, we were fighting the length of the bow, axle to axle, if you remember, there was an axle. There isn't anymore.
Okay.
We got rid of that just because, at some point, even if you're shooting a mechanical release, a bow is going to get too short, to shoot it accurately on it. And so there is no restriction there anymore. And yeah, it's up to 99% let off. Draw locks, all that stuff completely, that's a whole different subject. That's a more of a crossbow.
Yeah, with the technology of bows and how it jumps so much every year, I was wondering if we're keeping up with that or not. So
yeah, and that's how they chose to keep up with that going,
exactly.
You can shoot. I would love to try to
No, I would.
shoot one and just to see because any little flaw you have in your
it's like
unreal.
that's the most inaccurate blow you could
Yeah,
most
exactly.
unforgiving wow
Exactly.
could ever ask.
Exactly.
I mean, I can't see how people shoot 90%, but people love it.
I know.
I get it.
Don't shoot it well.
I sure don't want to let up on it. That's for dang sure.
Oh, can you imagine?
Oh.
Especially with some of those cams.
Yes. Yeah. It's technology is getting. I tell guys all the time, and it's like cell phones. The technology in bows. I'm not seeing a lot of increases in speed, but the efficiency, the let off, things like that, the draw force curves, it's changing so rapidly.
Yeah, it has. And that bow, that last, me, I bought a bow about every 10 years. And when I bought that one from you, I'm in Arizona now, right? So I bought my very first PSE ever. But I gotta say, I shoot that bow like I used to shoot the Spectre Riser from Hoyt back in the day. I can shoot that bow really well. The technology is unbelievable.
Well, I tell people all the time that come in that everybody's making really good bows.
Yep.
15 years ago, there was some junk out there.
Right.
You really had to kind of weed through that. But nowadays, it's got to get some of the Ford Chevy Dodge, what feels good to you with the draw force for blank.
Absolutely.
They all are going to work for you. So,
well, and it's kind of like broadheads. Remember back in the day, you had Savora was the one to go, but there was Satellite. There was some junk broadheads out there. Today, if you buy a broadhead, they're pretty. I don't know of a junker.
Unless you're buying an Amazon from China,
Right,
thing.
right, absolutely.
If it's a reputable company, it's a decent product.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a lot more choices to choose.
Well, it's a lot more consistent from broadhead to broadhead.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about when people come in and they bring a head to you. We talked about the bearer of bad news.
Yeah.
Obviously, they have a number in their head with something's supposed to, what they think is going to, or what they've been told.
Right.
How often does that happen? And do they get pissed?
It happens very often.
Did they argue with you about the score?
No, I usually pull out the manual, and it's a joint manual, Boone and Crockett, Pope and Young one, the first one ever. And when I see my name as the editor, that gets rid of that. Because they know, okay, he knows what he's doing. And I try to explain, this is why. Look at this rule. I'm going to show you this when they're obviously upset. And I got to say, most of it is outfitters in Arizona. Not all. There's some really good ones that, like the Tribe, those guys know they're within 3 inches of an elk all the time. Because those tags aren't cheap and they better know what they're talking about. They're very good at measuring. So never an issue there. But I have had some that, I had a guy that lived in Springville here and shot a big elk. Nice big non-typical bull. And he goes, well, the guy told me it's 420. And I'm looking at this bull bride. I'm like, oh my gosh, he goes, luckily he goes, but I don't think so. And it was still, a 395-inch bull.
It's still a stud, a 30-inch less.
But it's 30 inches off.
Yeah.
And, I run into a lot of that. And the problem with it is the guides aren't necessarily giving a bad score. A lot of times they use gross only.
Mm-hmm.
And people come there, they don't realize, no, to make the book, it's net. And they're not told that. If they've never been involved in the scoring or know about it, they have no clue to that. And so I have to explain the gross and net. And, you hear the nets are for fish. And I always tell people, well, what do you live off? Your gross income or your net income? What pays the bills? It's the same thing as taxes. You get taxed on scoring, if you will, for symmetry. And like I tell them, you can't change it now because when Boone and Crockett first, there's a standard there. So you're trying to compare an apple to an apple. To change that now would be crazy.
I've always argued, my philosophy is if it grows, you count it.
Right.
I'm the SCI kind of guy.
Right.
I never really understood why we want to deduct things.
Right.
And maybe you can explain that, why it's a fair.
So when Groundsel Fitz developed this scoring system for Boone and Crockett as a leading authority in ungulate and antler growth and animals, their view was the most perfect symmetry, like a whitetail. I'll use a whitetail to be the most mature, healthiest animal. That is what they want. That perfect symmetry growing, let's say it's a 5x5, counting their eye guards or their G1s. And we wanted the healthiest animal is going to be very, very similar to side. When they get injuries or they get older, you've seen it. There's different stuff going on with antlers. So anything other than that, there would be a deduction between. That's what they came up with. So, if there's an inch deduction from this brow tine to this one, that's going to come off the score at the end. And that's how that first started. But it was mainly the perfect rack. What is the perfect? And there is a couple that in Pope and Young and Boone and Crockett that you go, oh my gosh, it's a 14-point whitetail and it has less than 2 inches of deduction. That's incredible. But when you look at it, you go, my gosh, that is the poster. That's what they wanted. That's what they envisioned. Where it gets a little different for people to understand is non-typical category. Well, if it's non-typical, let's not have any deduction. Kind of like, what you were saying, SCI. But no, you take that typical frame still, and then you add the abnormal points, or the non-typical points. That's the hardest thing for me to explain to people. They're going, no, it's a non-typical category, so there shouldn't be any deductions. There is for the symmetry of the typical.
So it's still deductions in the symmetry.
And the symmetry for the typical frame only.
So basically, if the typical, and then for the non is added to.
Yes.
It's on that.
Yeah. So it's like if you have an 8x8 bull elk, but it's basically a 6-point typical bull with 2 extra flyers coming out, if you will, on the side. That 6 point is going to be symmetry deduction, And then those abnormals would be added to that
Okay.
score.
I understand that.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so that's the biggest thing. And then, they go, well, you know, if it grows it should get it. And I'm like, you're right. But then we couldn't count inside spread. So there is that little buffer because we do count inside spread. And there's little rules that I always have to explain to them, and a lot of guides don't know. Like, they know it now with deer and elk. Like, hey, if your inside spread on a mule deer is greater than your main beams, you don't get that inside spread. You only get what your longest main beam is. So, if your mule deer inside spread is 30 inches, but your longest main beam is 24, you only get a 24-inch inside spread.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where a lot of people come in and they go, wait a minute, it's 6 inches more. No, you don't get that. So there's little rules that you learn as a measure that not everybody knows. That causes a lot of that surprise.
Yeah.
When
I
it's
see that.
somebody. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But once you explain it to them, most are really good. I've never had anyone go, nope, I don't want to do it now. Once you explain why and the reasoning, and I tell them, look, if I was those forefathers, we would not be measuring moose the way we measure moose. It's the number one animal that goes down at judges table. And I don't like our non-symmetry rule for whitetail and elk. So a non-symmetry rule is, let's say you got a 7x6 elk, typical. But the G5 on this side, so the point that's after the sword, is matched to this one, but there's another typical point in between the 4 and 5. That just doesn't get counted. That becomes an abnormal point and is deducted from the net score.
Ouch.
Yeah. And I would love to have asked the forefathers why that rule? Because on whitetail, you see it a lot too. And when it upsets the symmetry of the rack, that becomes now an abnormal point, even though it's a typical grown point, but because it's spaced in between, it's now an abnormal. Yeah. And I would have rather liked it to just cancel out, not be a deduction. You just don't get credit for it.
So is this scoring, was it back in the 1880s, 1890s? Is that when they came up with this?
Yeah. Early 1900s is
Okay.
when,
So could it have been that they just didn't have a lot of that, that kind of animals to even have that, hey, this could happen?
that's possible on some species. I don't think so with that rule because again, they wanted that perfectly symmetrical. And if there's a point in there that upsets that,
We want it gone.
we want it gone. I would have loved if they said we just want it gone, but they want one step more and said it's now going to be an abnormal point, so it comes off that final end score. That's the hardest one for me to explain to people, and to new measures and measures at panels. So when we do a judges panel, every 2 years, the top 5 heads get invited for both Boone and Crockett and Pope and Young. Boone and Crockett's every 3 years, but then some of the most best measures in the nation convene and they authenticate those original measurements. We don't remeasure it per se to get a different score. So if you got it measured, you got one that went to panel, all we're doing is to make sure it didn't get measured incorrectly the first time because it's the top of the top, right? It's one of the largest heads. And so at the judges panel, I mean, I've even had caught judges going, hey, that's an unsymmetry. Oh man, you're right. Man,
They're catching us at panel.
at panel.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because you don't see it very often. You only see it on a whitetail. It's a rule for whitetail and elk only. And it's only on elk after the G4 with the sword point. And so, I mean, I have one that it happened to me. So I use that for our classes to show them. And they're like, that's messed up. So that's one I would change if I could. Moose, same thing, longest length of the palm, the most parallel to the inside. Well, what's most parallel line to you and to me may be different.
That can
And
be opinion based.
absolutely. I would have loved to have had a little different on that. But for the most part, when you really look from the era time frame they did it, they were brilliant because they thought of things that you go, wow, now I know why that rule's there. I mean, it was pretty labor intensive and brilliant minds back then. A lot of research on how antlers and skulls are are made, and what is a trophy? What size are we going to call it a trophy? And, those have fluctuated over the years because, as you were alluding to earlier, we got more data, right? The more animals you get, the more data you have to look. Is that an appropriate minimum entry score, or should we lower it
Or race it.
and we've done both with both clubs recently, and I've only had a little bit of that. What we changed here recently, 2 years ago, because they didn't have enough data then, and because management is so much better now than it was then, they never had a non-typical category for Thule elk or Roosevelt elk. Now they have crown points that they don't go against you, they just get added. But an extra point below the fourth is a deduction because they never had a non-typical category. Well, we created one because we now have 60, 70 animals that meet that criteria. And we were able to bring that to the committee and look at all the raw data and go, yeah, it's probably time we create a category. Because back then, if you remember, Thule elk were almost extinct.
Yeah.
And so now there's more data, more animals to look at. And that's part of my job as well, is I have to review these animals on an annual basis to see if our minimums are still the same based on new entries coming in. And we have changed ours. Cows here, Coos whitetail used to be 65 inches, and now 70. And because it wasn't popular then. Nobody bow hunted Coos whitetail 20 years ago.
No.
And so as we started getting more, and Mexico became more approachable for people to go down and hunt them, and we're getting all this data, we're now seeing, 65 inches is probably a little low. That's probably, in some areas of Mexico, that could be a 2.5-year-old deer. And is that really a mature species that we're looking for? So those went up. Colombian blacktail went up.
So, with all the high fences and stuff like that we have now in places, how do you know what kind of that that, hey, this was a fair chase animal, that it wasn't in a hide fence or a bred animal?
Well, it's a great point, because obviously there's going to be some that lie on their affidavit. So when you enter an animal, there's an affidavit you sign that it was taken within fair chase, blah blah blah. Whitetail, it's a little bit more easy, only because the social media side has made it much easier to track an animal. So there are traits in guys on my committee. I have some whitetail experts. I mean, they'll go, that's a high fence rack. They can just see it. And then they'll research, and then lo and behold, this ranch, here it is in velvet. And, some of them we've had to remove, not very many, maybe in my time on the committee, maybe 4 or 5. One simply just didn't know. He read the affidavit and went, I didn't even think about high fence. I thought it was okay. It's a 100,000 acre Texas high fence ranch. Yeah, no, so we had to remove that. Some of them, it's that number thing and fame, putting it in for the wrong reasons, if you will.
Mhm.
But mainly, if it's behind a high fence, usually a spouse or someone else does too, and eventually that comes forward. And then I do the investigation, and that was in my wheelhouse, doing with what I did. And so I do an investigation, and if I have enough evidence to support that, it was not taken by means of fair chase, that I remove it. And then that person can never enter an animal, even if they get it. Yeah, because they lied on a fair chase affidavit, and they can never enter. And I tell people, make sure this is legit, because once you knowingly falsify a document, we can never have that in our record system. Because in my opinion, and Boone Crockett's opinion, our records, the integrity of the records is our utmost. It's the most important thing to records chairman. They have to be. And the moment I hear of a poaching animal, and I've had several that have been removed, one from up here, and once that's discovered and proved, we remove it. We will pending an investigation a lot of times once the case is adjudicated, it's easy to remove it because they're found guilty or they plead guilty. And then those folks can never enter an animal again either. And it's sad because there's actually some really nice people that just do it. I don't know why they do it, just for the notoriety. And then they can never legitimately, I mean, they've killed things afterwards legitimately that should be in there for the data sets that we can't afford to have that in there. So the moment we find out about those, we do investigate them. Like I've told gentlemen on the phone, I don't like Brian, so I'm going to say, hey, that animal, no, there's got to be substantial proof to remove something because there's a lot of jealousy in this hunting community now too. And so, we're going to be doing a special panel. We do special panels as well and off convention years for only potential world records. So like if we got
did you hear that?
That's under.
That's a
That's
good
awesome.
number.
Yeah. We're getting storming it.
if we get a new potential world record and we just had a convention, I can convene a special panel to confirm if that's the world record. And we have a
So
non-typical.
is that its own panel then?
Yes. So I will pick those people, 2 teams, just like we do at normal panel. They will convene and they will measure. One team will measure it, give me a score sheet. Next team will measure it, give me the score sheet, and then if there's any what we call resolves, like well, you guys called this one a typical point, you guys didn't. I have to bring them together and we resolve it. That rarely happens on things like that with really, really seasoned measurers.
Is that how it is with regular panels? There's always 2.
Yep, always
Always
2.
two.
And then if both teams, for me, the way I run it is if both teams' scores are less than the original, I have it measured a 3rd time. Just because when I make that phone call to the hunter that it went down, I need to know why. And what I make them do is duplicate what the original measure did, the mistake. Oh, he measured this main beam here. That's how he got that number. We're going to take all his other measurements, but just that one measurement is not, we're not going to take that. We're going to take the panels. And now we have a new score. So that's how it's done. It's done very thorough. I mean, when Brian Yorksmith went to his first panel, he was shocked at just how meticulous, slow. I mean, you're holding a cable and your rest of your 3-man team is going, are you okay with this line? Yeah. And then it's that meticulous because you're talking top end animals. And so when we have a potential world record, which we do, a non-typical American elk, that's going to be special paneled next week or 13th of October. But that particular animal caused me a lot of phone calls, a lot of emails, and that's the KC Brooks bull.
That's the one from Washington.
The one from Washington. And it is currently, the original score is higher than our world record and higher than Boone and Crockett's world record. So there will be a special panel that will be going on for that to confirm that it was taken legal. I mean, I got phone calls. What was this?
There's a lot.
Oh my gosh. I ended up talking to the game. I just talked to the game warden. And he's like, he's laughing. He's like, no, this is a fact. This guy's legit. I came out there but I had to do an investigation on something that I shouldn't have had to. It was pure jealousy. On this one, it was pure. And for folks that don't like baiting. And like I tell people, okay, it's follows the law. It was taken legally. He drew this tag. I'm not going to get into the specifics of what I personally like. I may not like chocolate ice cream. You may love chocolate ice cream. Doesn't really matter. It's still ice cream. And so that was the biggest hurdle and complaint I had is people just didn't realize elk and deer. Wait till they accept. Yeah, Texas.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny how that is.
Elk. What? Elk can get baited? I go on these 2, Oregon allows it too. And I'm like, yeah, I didn't know that. I honestly, Brian, I'm the record chairman. I did not know that. But once I researched and went, yeah, it's legal. That was a hard pill for some people to swallow. And so, and Casey's killed. He's a slam. I mean, he's killed everything. He doesn't need to cheat. And guys like that anyway, him, Chuck Adams, guys like these high profile guys, it's sad what they have to do. Chuck hires attorneys sometimes before he hunts in a place he's never hunted just to make sure of all the laws, because he can't afford to make one small infraction or it will be blown up on social media. And that's a sad state of affairs. Yeah,
And they would risk too much by cheating.
absolutely. Absolutely.
And they're both.
Yeah. Yeah. No. And, you know, the hunter was great through all of it. I mean, I can't even imagine the backlash he was getting where he was from, but Casey was very good with us and with me in particular. And he came down to the convention. I met him there. You know, it's a giant bull. It is 30, 40 inches above our war record. It's a huge bull.
Nuts.
And I look at it coming from my background as what an incredible conservation success story. To grow an animal in today's world that large, of the largest ever recorded in history, that's an amazing feat if you think about it. So, you know, kudos to that Game and Fish and all those up there doing it. But man, that's the negative side of records, if you will, is the jealousy part of it.
Yeah. Well, and go back to the social media part.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
It just runs around.
Yeah, because if we didn't have social media, you would only see that in an article in a magazine.
Exactly.
And so, yeah, and then anybody, there's no accountability for social media. So you could say anything.
Yeah, the
And
keep
not be
it coming is
accountable.
coming out. And,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
exactly. What about, I don't want to drag along, but I was going to ask you, what about bears and running dogs, things like that? Any restrictions on that?
No, bears are allowed for, hounds are allowed for bears and lions. They can use GPS trackers on the dogs. There's not a houndsman I know of now that doesn't have their $10,000 to $12,000 investment with a GPS tracker collar. What you can't do is you still have to hunt and pursue. So you have to be there present when the dog's released, of course, and you follow the dogs. What you can't do is let them go, sit in a truck, and just use the technology and go, hey, they're showing treat over here, let's drive over there and walk down there and shoot an animal. That would not be allowed in either club. You still have to pursue and go with the dogs and all that. But the myth was, oh, GPS are not allowed. That's not true, because now they're just so available for every houndsman, and I get it. I mean, that's a huge investment that they have, and they don't want to lose their dogs. And I've gone 25 times now for mountain lions here with a local houndsman, and he uses them, and I go with the dogs. I mean, I run with them. But at the point where I go, hey, we need to find your dogs. You got 2 lost. Hunt's over for me. And I know if we went there and there's one up there and we used it to find a dog, I couldn't enter it. And you know, I mean, that's where it's at for hounds and GPS technology, is when you use that technology only to get that animal. You know, most people like us, we understand it. Yeah, it's fair chase. We understand it. You always have those people, well, what if this, or what? They're trying to just go as far up to that line as they can. And I get it. But, you know, I just tell them, look, if you're using the technology and that's what found the cat or the bear for you, there's your answer.
Yeah.
If you hump the hills, and there's nothing wrong with going, hey, we let the dogs go, we're on this ridge and I can see a road over there. I know there's a road over there. There's nothing wrong that says we're going to get back into this truck, drive around over there. That's where they're going. And I get out and I can hear them, and you go, there's nothing wrong with that. And you can use the technology knowing they're going there. It's just that, you know, hey, they're treed. They've been there for 15 minutes. They probably have a bear or a cat in there. And then you walk the hunter down and exactly. And what that started, like in Arizona, the law is you have to be present. There's some states that don't have that law, and that's really made for the people that you call them, they jump on a plane, they come out here and they shoot, and it's happened. And so that's why we have that rule.
And Tony, got anything else?
No, I'm good.
Yeah. You want to? Do we miss anything?
Just with what I tell folks, if you're interested in an animal, it doesn't even have, it could be one you shot
Gotcha.
20 years ago and you're up here by me, man, I'll measure it for you. I'll tell you what it was. I'll show you how to measure. But get involved either with your state or your like Pope and Young or national organizations. Bow hunting in Arizona used to be ABA, but it's not as much anymore. BIA, Brian and Marvin and all those folks do a great job. Get involved because you can make positive change for conservation and archery nationally. And what Pope and Young did for us here in Arizona, I just happen to be on the board and I live in Arizona, but I would have been assigned that with Brian Rinsma to help send a letter from Pope and Young, because we sent a letter from Pope and Young to every commissioner on the crossbow issue of where we stand. And crossbows are not, like I've always said, they're not the devil. They're a viable weapon system. They belong in the hunting community. They're just not a bow and arrow, just like a flintlock's not a bow and arrow.
Well,
I would love to have seen, and maybe I think they will in the future, maybe create a crossbow only type season in some of those metro areas that we proposed. I think they will look into that. So that's a good thing. But I just, we're not anti crossbow.
No, but even like in the archery industry itself with the ATA and things like that, how they have so embraced and brought in and promoted the crossbow and the
Yeah.
archery. It's tough. And so many states have just accepted it. I mean,
Right.
most states, it's accepted. That's just the way it is.
Well, when I did that research for our group, you talked to a biologist back east, and he laughed and he said, sir, I get where you're coming from, but, and I think it was one of the Carolinas or Alabama or one of those, like, look, we kill a deer a day. I need 100,000 deer killed, and I don't care what they're killed with. I just need that many. They don't understand the West. And he goes, you're limited on water and your resource is so much smaller than ours. Yes, that's a big deal. I could understand that. For us, I don't care what they use. And so they just put them in. They didn't want to make a different season. They just put them in where they could plug them in, And that was bad for us.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for coming.
Sure.
It's been very
Come
interesting.
down
I
here.
learned a
Great
lot.
conversation.
Yeah, I learned a lot. You're always a fun guy to talk to. I love when you come in the shop. We do this all the time.
Yeah, we do this a lot.
We must put a mic in front of us and talk about it.
I really appreciate the opportunity because, like I said, I come in your shop. We talk this all the time and Pope and Young and what we could do for archery shop owners and everything. But I always tell everyone, and what we leave with is, if you don't know about Pope and Young, call me and ask me. Email me. I'm in every magazine on there. I'll tell you what we can, what we can't do. And you don't have to even enter an animal. If you're not into entering animals, become a Pope and Young member. You're part of the bow hunting group.
Well, I think as long as we looked at it as a conservation thing,
Absolutely.
it's definitely Arizona Elk or Rocky Mountain Elk Foundation or Ducks Unlimited or National Turkey Federation. It's the same kind of organization.
Exactly.
We have to look at it that direction.
Exactly. And we just have a records keeping component. Yeah. And it started out as that's how we got a club and got archery only seasons. When you talk to 25-year-olds today and go, you wouldn't have an archery only season if it wasn't for Pope and Young. No way. And then when you explain why, they go, I didn't know that. And so, it's just it's a never ending fight to keep our seasons. I mean, we just went through one.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was a fight.
Yeah, and it was a fight. Yes, it was.
Well, thanks again for coming. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Guys, appreciate you guys watching the podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. Like and subscribe. Follow us where you can. We'll be doing these all the time now. We're having a good time with them.
We're going to keep going.
Yeah, maybe one of these days we'll do a quick elk or deer scoring thing on here and do one. Just do one species and kind of show the myths and things that happen and where mistakes happen.
That'd be great.
Yeah,
We'll do a javelina skull.
There you go. Javelina.
I don't want to do a Halloween skull or not. we may do these sheds right here.
Yeah, those
There
sheds
you
are
go.
giant.
Yeah, we got some giant sheds here. But again, thank you for coming.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
you very much.
Appreciate it. I had a great time.
Appreciate all you do for the industry and things like that. So,
Yeah. Yeah, no problem.
And even when I'm off the board, you can call me.
we will.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
know.
All right, guys. Thanks a lot. Appreciate you.
Okay.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you.
Good night.